Good Monday to you, everybody in Com 110. Welcome to week boom 6. We are just 2 short weeks away, excuse me, from wrapping things up this semester. How's everybody hanging in there? Well, I hope. Okay, for this video and for week 6, and that's an awfully bright light. Alexa, lights off. That's better. Let's take a look at what we're doing this week. Now, first and foremost, you have a quiz that is actually, back from week 5, but it is due by 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time this Monday that I'm making this video, 9/23/2004. So make sure that you finish that, okay? Again, as long as we're on what we did last week, I'm about halfway through your speeches. I hope to have them complete and finished and out of the way by the end of this week. So you get some feedback on the weekend for speech number 3, which is what I want to talk about now. So for week 6, you have another speech due, all right? And you will see the outline for said speech in this week's module. And this week's speech is the persuasive speech. Now, the persuasive speech is probably the most difficult of all the speeches. Excuse me. It's the one that people tend to avoid. And I don't mean, just in the sense of, oh, are you going to, who wants to give a speech? Oh, me. Or there's a speech emergency and somebody calls out across the crowd, is there a speaker in the house? And, and you say, I'm a speaker. No. What I mean by that is that people, and let me back up here a little bit. One of the ways to gauge what it is that an individual or a large demographic does or does not do well in a concentrated application is to just sort of back up and have a look at what the individual or group, I guess it's individual and group, does and doesn't do well in normal situations. So what do I mean by that? So concentrated situation is when you have to give a speech and you have to demonstrate something, or you have to explain something, okay? Or you have to persuade someone, okay? And there's a dearth of persuasive speaking skills amongst us today, which is ironic because we've never had more medium by which we can connect with each other via speech. And when we say, to distinguish between the two, this is the medium. This is the platform on which the message gets to you. I don't like what my light is doing here. Alexa, lights on. That's the medium. Alexa, lights on. The media is the message that is on the platform. Okay, so we have this hyperabundance of media in a lot of different forms through which we could be persuading one another. And yet we also simultaneously have this uptick in a lack of willingness to engage in persuasive speech and persuasive dialogue, and a demonstrated inability and frustration in engaging in persuasive speech and dialogue. And how is that demonstrated? Frequently, when you hear, and especially when you get to policymaker level, when you hear people talk about the media that's accessible across this medium, that is things on the internet, the topic tends towards or is centered on, we have to have more controls over the fake, the misleading information that is on the internet that can influence people. You know, the remedy for speech that you don't like or that you feel is inaccurate is more speech, more persuasive speech, not the suppression of speech whose persuasion you don't like. And then secondly, we seem to have a demonstrative intolerance, in addition to the intolerance, sort of a shortening of patience. And it's it's actually become its own iconographic designation. We call that a meme of, say, the Karen, for instance. And apologies to anybody whose name is Karen. My mother is named Karen. But that is someone that goes from, this is what I want to happen, it's not happening, to now I am using force, and whether that's physical force or verbal force or emotional force or situational force, to get to happen what I want to happen, rather than persuasion. All right. Why is that? Why is it that we have this hyperabundance of medium, that is means by which to get the message, but we have this declining participation in persuasion? One of the theories is called technoapathy. And that is, as you put in automated processes in place of things that you used to have to do yourself, your self's ability to do those things goes down. In other words, and hence the name atrophy. So in other words, if, say, you break a bone, and I've broken several, actually more than several, 27 to be exact. And let's say, because I broke this arm in three places, into three pieces once, and it was set, and then my arm was strapped to my body, and it was immobilized and not used for a period of 3 months. All right, the musculature in this arm had decreased, that is atrophy, because I wasn't using it. Right, that's an example from physiology, but the same thing is true by way of habit. And that's the interesting irony of things like social media. I think it started out with all the best intentions, the social media, and the intent was to connect us. I mean, you could say, oh no, Dr. Gardner, don't you know Mark Zuckerberg, began what became Facebook as a means by which to meet girls while he was at college. Yeah, okay. But as they, and I should say rate girls, which is true. But as the, company evolved, that they really thought having this digitized platform would increase our connective activities and therefore our sense of connectivity. And the data is now very deep and very wide and points in the exact opposite direction by way of effect. That our sense of isolation, insecurity, and lack of connectivity is going up, not down. And there are a number of works that you can read for this. In fact, one of them, I'm seeing if I happen to have the copy on my shelf at handy, but I don't. Look up Alone Together by Turkle, 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 Cheryl Turkle, Alone Together. And in this, she's an MIT scholar, and she takes a deep dive into what it is that these digitized platforms are doing to us by way of social networking. And it's not connectivity. Okay. And interestingly, the less connected that you feel, the less willing you are to engage in persuasion. Back in the first speech exercise, one of the options for the speech, for the historical speech that I gave you, was the establishment of a telephone line, a secure telephone line between the office of the president and the office of the premier in the Kremlin in the Soviet Union. Well, the purpose of that was to establish a clear line of communication, because there wasn't. Things were being relayed and frequently misinterpreted, to increase the level of connectivity between these two powers, the United States and the Soviet Union, to decrease the sense of isolation, to increase the ability of one to persuade the other. And that persuasion usually was, hey, what do you think? Let's not blow up the earth. And it worked. Okay, so as we become less connected, or at least we're feeling that way, we're less, you might say, willing or able, or the 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I mean, basically the same thing, to engage in persuasive interaction with one another. And this is not a good thing, because we are. I mean, this is a fundamental and foundational characteristic, fact of our being. We are highly interdependent, connected beings. And that's a good thing, actually. Okay? That we're highly interconnected and dependent upon one another. So for instance, another slight tangent here. I've heard some people criticize the level of consumption among Americans relative to the rest of the world. Okay. Now, as a Christian, and as I like to think a conscientious citizen, yes, we should, you should navigate what it is you get and consume by the following maxim, and that is, first of all, understand the difference between need and want, and then cultivate an internal attitude in which you really only want what you need and not the other way around. Be leery of developing a sense of need for what you want. Okay, that aside. But the capacity, and this is something that is particularly demonstrative in Western civilization, the capacity to produce excess beyond what you need is, evolutionary speaking, okay, is a powerful mechanism for social cohesion. It helps keep societies together and cooperation amongst them, which makes for a stable environment. How is this so? Because when you have excess, now you have the capacity to share. And when you have the capacity to share, you have the capacity to create new and strengthen existing alliances. And since we're interconnected, cooperative beings, the stronger our connection and alliances are, the better off we are. And I mean that, both in terms of our psychology, our sociology, our political well-being, everything. I mean, from the moment we're conceived until we pass from this material plane, we're dependent beings. None of us became who we were on our own. We're not, reptiles that hatch from an egg and then slither off and start to catch bugs and small lizards. That's just not how we're designed. Okay? So the ability to persuade is a good thing, because it goes hand in hand with our ability to stay connected. And as our ability and our willingness to persuade goes down, and this is one of those questions of it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Our connectivity tends to go down. Now, the question, of course, that puzzles researchers, is it that as our connectivity goes down, our willingness to engage in persuasion goes down, or is it that as our willingness to participate in persuasion goes down, our connectivity goes down? The question is, which direction does this causal relationship run? Okay, that's a deeper, discussion about speech and what drives it and how it works than we're doing in this class. All right, but suffice to say, to learn how to be persuasive in small and large matters is an important skill for you as you move through life, and one that you'll if you look around, you'll note that it's being done less and less. All right, so for this week, I'm giving you an assignment that is different by way of the speech to produce than all the other two speeches. All right. In the first one, I gave you a choice of three historical topics. In the second one, the demonstration speech, the demonstrative speech, I let you pick whatever it was you wanted to demonstrate. Some of you did baking cookies, and some of you have done physical fitness and this sort of thing. One of the ways to practice effective persuasive speaking is to select something that you may or may not be passionate about. Okay, this is kind of where we're going for this week's assignment. So if you go to week 6 module and you open it up, start with the overview, and this will give you the readings. Again, it's for the selection from the speaker lab. Then go to the assignment. All right, and in the assignment, you'll find the assignment sheet. Read it carefully, because based on the first letter of your last name, and I say, and I go A through M and N through Z. There's no one in the class whose their last name begins with A. There's no one in the class whose last name begins with Z. I'm aware of this. It's just a standard alphabet break. All right. If your name begins with A through M, I've given you a statement that I want you to construct, or around which I want you to construct your persuasive speech. I want you to persuade your audience of the statement that I've given you. If your last name begins with N through Z, I've given you a slightly different statement that I want you to construct a speech that will persuade your audience. Now, as you read in the instructions of this week's exercise, ultimately, the efficacy, the effectiveness of a persuasive speech lies in the speaker's capacity to move people to do something. They're action oriented. Okay, that doesn't mean that if a call, say, to think about something differently, doesn't have an action in it, that's not a persuasive speech. No, but that's sort of that's the high bar for persuasive speech. And that's perhaps why it's difficult, because its success is significantly dependent upon what the audience does, as opposed to what they understood or what they enjoyed. Okay, and understanding and enjoying are precursors to doing, but you can have understanding and enjoyment, say, in historical speech, that doesn't require any doing. Okay, so you add that level of difficulty into the speech. So go to the module for this week, read it carefully. And when you read when you go through the select readings, I want you to pay particular attention to the 5 key elements that are outlined. That is, what sort of, I mean, these are almost like steps. Okay. So you could call them that, the 5 key steps in constructing your persuasive speech. If you're wondering by way of format, gosh, how do I build this speech? Use those 5 steps, right? So pick, the 5 steps are: pick your fight, support your claim with evidence. Step number 2 is particularly important. I want to make sure that you pay particular attention to step number 2, that depending on which of the statements has been assigned to you based on the first letter of your last name. All right. Make sure that you support your advocacy, your persuasion, your call to action with evidence. And then remember an emotional hook. Avoid the kitchen sink approach that is, less is more, often in persuasion. And then think about and construct a strong closer to bring it all together. Okay. All right. That's 20 minutes or thereabout, which is longer than I wanted. But there you go. Okay, everybody. I will not have office hours on Wednesday and Friday. I'm going to be out of the office. I will be checking email up to Tuesday. In fact, I'll be out of my office and away from my email Wednesday and Thursday. And then I will be back checking my email, and I'll begin grading or continue grading. I've already started grading your quizzes on Friday. All right. So have a fantastic week. Good luck with speech number 3. All right. If you're having any questions or issues, please try to get a hold of me by way of email before Wednesday morning. And if you don't hear from me Wednesday, Thursday, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just off grid. I'm just away from the office. And I will see you on the other side on Canvas. Take care, everybody. God bless. Bye-bye.